sky's not blue.
You need to understand that when the time comes, I'm going to be taking over.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Cult House Podcast. I'm your host, Roger Riddell. I just want to take a minute to thank you for checking out this show and also give you a little bit of background on what I'm looking to do here. So, I'm aiming to have 2 episodes a month featuring a long-form conversation with a different musician, writer, artist, comedian, wrestler, basically anyone who does anything in a field where success is kind of dependent upon building a cult following, hence the name. So if you dig what you're seeing, go ahead and like and subscribe. I'm working on getting audio-only version of this onto Apple Podcast, Google Play, and so on. My first guest this week is Eddie Gobbo. He's a good friend from Chicago who is the former vocalist of the band Jarred Loose, currently sings for the band Something Is Waiting. They were kind enough to let me use their song Hippies Become Lawyers as the theme for this show. So I am supremely thankful for that, and I hope you all enjoy the conversation.
This entire friendship is built on a foundation of me talking shit about you on a blog.
That's true. And now 10 years later, we're on your first podcast.
Yeah. First
of all, it's not too late to turn back. If this podcast thing isn't for you, you're only 30 seconds into it. No, I think this is going to be a really good show. I'm interested to be on. I'm thankful to be on the first episode. But you're right, man. I thought about this before today. If people don't know our history, it literally started with you ripping on me, for lack of a better description, in a review of my band. And then we just kind of hit it off from there, which is usually the way you don't start any type of friend relationships. But that was what fueled it. Negativity, essentially, which is awesome.
Yeah, like literally 6 or 7 months after that, you were offering to let me live in like your spare room.
Yeah. What had happened was, for all your listeners, basically my band played a show. I was in a band called Jarred Loose at the time. It was actually our first show, and it was in Chicago when you lived here with the Atlas Moth at a club called Ultra Lounge, which no longer exists. And it was our first gig, and it was a well-attended show for sure. And and I'm sure we'll get into the Chicago scene or whatever, but this was when the Chicago scene was really about to just burst. Everyone had a lot of eyes on it. So it made sense that someone would come out and maybe write a review of the show. That happened actually quite often in that band very early on. But it was our first gig, and then I think you said something very complimentary about the band. Kind of like we didn't sound like it was kind of our first gig. It sounded maybe like we'd been around the block a little bit. And then there was me as a vocalist, particularly a frontman, that was doing my whole frontman shtick of, basically cutting a promo between songs of like I'm a wrestler and I'm almost playing a pseudo character on stage, if you will. And then I think you were blindsided by the fact that I thanked you for writing the review. I saw it online, obviously, and then I shared it. And then I said, thanks for the write-up. And then it kind of went from there.
Yeah, you offered to give me a t-shirt.
Anyone who's listening to this, anytime someone does anything positive or negative involving any type of media, I back it. As long as the one thing I don't back is when it's disorganized and says things in it where they're very naive. I will read reviews where it says, I don't know, man, I can't explain it, but I don't like this. And then I'm saying to myself, if you can't explain it, then don't be writing about it, And I remember whatever you wrote, I'll have to try to find it. It's 10 years, removed from it, but it was at least, it made some sense to me. So I'm like, all right, that's cool. And a good review's a review, I was stoked on it. For first show, first review, I'll take it,
Yeah, I don't even know if that site's up anymore, because that blog, I was calling it Heavier Than Your Mom. And I don't think I could even get away with that today. I'm pretty sure you get canceled for mom jokes now. But I've always appreciated a good mom joke.
You're right. You do get canceled for that. And I think that, but back then, 10 years ago, yeah, you could have your mom joke in your title of your blog. So
Yeah, no, the best one that I've ever read that no one's ever going to be able to top for me was the ClickHole article where the title was I wore a fat suit for a day so that I would understand what it's like to be your mom.
that's a good one. I thought of ClickHole's fun. It's not as good as Onion, and I thought of a really good Onion one,
Well, they're
which
the
I know
same thing. ClickHole is
it's
just
the same
Onion's
dude?
version of BuzzFeed. Same company.
Okay. I'm looking forward to an Onion coming up. Every year around this time, around Mother's Day, they have that one where it's, I gotta get the phrasing right, but it's mom is gets breakfast in bed after getting eaten out. That's always my favorite, and I wait for it every year around Mother's Day. It's awesome.
I mean, yeah, it's they've got those standards that they dig up like every year, right around the same time.
I know, and it's super fun. It sucks though, man, because I love the Onion, I really do, but the hard times especially in our world, what we like has just become such a force, and they're so good. And I don't want to reveal who he is because he might be someone that I don't know if that world wants to keep it quiet, but we being our band, my band Something's Waiting, has a friend who writes for them. And as soon as I get him in my close proximity, I start throwing headlines at him. Would this go over well? And he always likes them. It's just a matter of I never took that step into writing for hard times. But I appreciate anyone who's written one of them. You're great. They're so fun.
I wrote for the AV Club for a bit, like right around the time that we first met too.
You did.
And I was always disappointed that I could never get anyone there to connect me with anyone on the Onion side of things so that I could pitch ZZ Top donate beards to Locks of Love.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I thought of a ZZ Top one, which is ZZ. All right, there's a little bit of a back story to this one, which means it's not that good. There's a indie artist named ZZ Ward. And I said ZZ Top pissed at ZZ Ward because they're no longer the last stop in like the CD aisle or the record aisle. Because now ZZ Ward alphabetically is behind ZZ Top.
Yeah. Well, the
Pretty
joke,
good,
that
right?
joke's, well, it's dependent on people understanding what a record store is, though.
And when I phrased this now, I said CDs as well. So no one understands what CDs are anymore.
Give it like a few years and everyone's going to come back around to seeing CDs as like the premier format.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be laughing my way to the bank, man. I got every CD I ever bought is still in my home in a closet, organized, boxed up. And if I ever take a trip down memory lane and I used to write myself notes in CD booklets. And I'd be like, listen to this song, or this is interesting. And this was my childhood. I focused so much on CDs. I love them. And CDs still really sound the best. And I know this because it depends. I'm just saying this. Technically, vinyl could sound the best, but you got to have a banging system for it to work. And I go to people's homes, and they have these Crossley turntables that they buy from a Walmart or Amazon, and they sound like complete shit. And I'm like, you need banging speakers, you need everything, blah, 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 blah. But everyone has a car that can at least get the job for the most part done with the CD. And it sounds really good. And MP3 sound like shit in a car compared to a CD.
I've never jumped onto the whole vinyl thing because I've got over 300 CDs. And as soon as I buy like one vinyl record, I'm going to want to replace all 300 of those CDs on vinyl.
Correct. And what I do is this, which is one, I used to collect vinyl back in the day, but I need all what I feel are the classics in my collection of vinyl. So I got all the Kisses, the early Kisses, the 70s Kiss, Sabbath, and then I go into my world, which is Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Poison. I got all that shit. And then the newer shit that my friends' bands put out certainly have a place in my collection. And then it kind of goes from there. So if I'm not really 100% sold on the record and they're trying to sell me a $40 gram fucking sleep vinyl or whatever, I might take or leave it because I don't need that.
Yeah, the one vinyl that I've actually like been kicking myself for not buying was that last Moth record because they had that whole special package with it.
Yeah. And there was a vinyl I purchased recently, which was, I want to say through from Ken Mode. I haven't received it yet, but it was a special European pressing or something. And they just found some copies. And I just said, all right, now I need to buy this because it's hard to get your hands on the really rad copies. And I know this because the last Something Is Waiting record, we had a swirl vinyl that got sold out right away. And now people are coming up to me 2 years removed from it saying, hey, have you found any extra copies of that? I'm like, no, they're long gone. They were gone like by the record release show. So yeah, the limited edition cool vinyls are what make it special. When you get the black vinyls, it's all about if you like listening to vinyl. And it's usually a weed thing. So it's people like to have their weed rituals. You throw on first side of an LP, you whatever, smoke with your girlfriend if you have one of your roommates or whatever. And then you pretty much don't get to the second album aside until maybe the next day, but it's a ritualistic thing.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned Something Is Waiting. Y'all are working on a new album right now. How far along is that?
It's in the infancy stages, but actually you, like a lot of people, we didn't tell anyone we were recording. And there was a reason for that, which was as soon as you announce that you're recording a record, literally people are hitting you up 6 weeks later and they're looking for a release date. And it's not that world really anymore. And I always compare it to the answer is somewhere in the middle for most bands between the punk bands that will record and mix and master in one night, classic LPs, and then some Trent Reznor, like look at Nine Inch Nails, The Fragile. I forget how long that took to write and record and the whole thing, but it was years. The answer is somewhere in the middle for a lot of bands, and that's kind of us. So we just didn't want to feel like we were on the clock from the jump, especially with us not being able to play shows. And I think its shows are kind of around the corner, to be honest with you, at least in Chicago. A couple months away for sure. I know some places that are actually kind of already booking, and I know that we're going to start getting emails left and right, but we were worried at the time that if we would have sort of fast-tracked it, we wouldn't be able to release it we have to release it without being able to play shows for it. And you got to talk to these bands that have done that during COVID. If it worked out for them, releasing a record while a pandemic was going on, it was probably more ears got on the record, but at least way less people were able to embrace it because the live show is key to it. So we just didn't know what was going on. And we wrote all through COVID. We went into the studio and right now we're 100% done with the drums. And we start going into guitars and eventually vocals from there. And you're probably going to see it. You're going to see the record out sometime within 1 year of me talking to you now. I could guarantee that. I just don't know where in the span of that year.
Yeah, and like you've got a lot of audio samples and things like that on your albums. So at what point are you like kind of gathering those kinds of things? And do you think of those things before you write the song or like after you write the song? Like do the audio samples that you pair with the song, are they things that you heard that kind of led to you writing a song or vice versa, or is it a mix of both?
Great point, or great question. There is always been, first of all, I hate doing anything where I don't have the ability to get sort of creative in the process. So there'll be, if I want to watch a movie, for example, and I watched many movies during COVID, and actually I will say this, I'm getting stoked, and we could talk about some films that came out recently, but I was so stoked. Like I've seen probably about 8 movies during COVID that were newer movies. Just watch them in my house that I think are great. I watched one this week that floored me, basically. I loved it, and it was Sound of Metal. If you haven't seen that, have you seen it?
Nah, I've heard kind of mixed things.
Dude, I loved it, man. And I was so stoked, not to get sidetracked, that Riz Ahmed is the lead actor, and his performance was amazing. He's got nominated for Academy Award for Best Actor for that. It's an awesome film, man. I applaud it. I think it rules, and I think it's the first film where it shows your lead character being part of a legit underground band, basically. And it's not like hacky, where it's and I love the movie Green Room, which came out 5 years ago at this point, if you've seen that, but it's about they're in like a DIY punk band, and then they're in the wrong club at the wrong time, basically. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it kind of comes across as all right, we're just doing like the summer tour bullshit thing where we're getting in a van and kind of just, we want to get away from our homes. This movie comes across as they're a legit band doing it, and there's still trials and tribulations being in an underground band that's successful, you know? So great movie. But when I'm in that mode of just sitting, chilling, watching TV or listening to something, I've always got my ears open. And then when something comes across my plate, I always will sit and record it in some way. Or the most vapid way of me regurgitating it is, you'll see this so often, is me taking our Instagram story and just me putting a sarcastic comment around something I'm watching. You know, so I just don't want that moment to be for naught. You know, I'm not looking for it. I could easily watch a movie and nothing sticks out to me. It's just that I want, if there's something funny that comes across the plate, I want to share it. So yeah, I'm stockpiling clips and everything throughout the course of it. And I already have a decent amount of clips that are going to piggyback all these songs. One thing that we've never really been, and I think this is what is to our detriment because we don't have a DJ in the band. We really need one. But it's we're never able to be a band like a White Zombie who uses the clips in the songs. We usually started out with them. Maybe there's going to be some tracks on this next record that ends with them. It's really hard for us to crowbar in though without someone being there to play it.
Yeah, you need to set up like a pedal board that's got like trigger buttons on it, man.
We actually have one of our evolutions of the band during the pandemic was I bought a sampler, like a big boy. And I'm technically going to be able to do that during our set because I think I'm the only person who doesn't play anything. So I'm going to be the guy responsible for hitting the buttons. So this is gonna come to fruition in some shape or form. And I think it's going to be awesome. Dude, especially when I listen to the bands that I love from a certain era, particularly the 90s, when I hear bands doing that, when I listen to a White Zombie record or all the Manson records with sound clips up the ass, and like particularly the early ones. And I love that. I think it's so charming. Like it's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, no, do you remember like it was around the early 2000s, the guitarist from Dope, because they used a lot of samples. He had one of his guitars had like a little keytar on it, and I think they could also trigger like the samples through that.
I do remember that, and there's other ways to do it too, where technically if you there was a band that toured with the Atlas Moth called The Ocean, and they had samples that ran through their computer, which was connected to their click tracks that their drummer played to. So they would go off, if memory serves, while they were playing and no one was hitting them. It was just the computer was communicating through an interface to play it at that moment. So,
yeah. No, I'm still waiting for that clip from Roseanne that you and I kept cracking up at. Like that was like, how was that, like 10 years ago now? No.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, man. I got to look up when that.
I think it was 2014.
I think it was, if memory serves, you were at my home, and then we were headed out to go to Kumas.
Yeah.
And then it was like, let me record this really quick because this is so funny. And then, you know, it's been uploaded on YouTube, and I guarantee I probably have the over-under is probably 5,000 views at this point because it's a hard clip to find, but I guarantee people have found it. So, and that's been years. So,
yeah, it was the first Something Is Waiting album got pulled off of Spotify a couple times over the samples, right?
Yeah, it was over samples, and it was mainly that. And now it's there to stay. And actually, I'm really happy that it's there to stay because what happened was during the course of it getting pulled off twice, Pete Grossman, our guitarist, re-engineered it, or no, he didn't re-engineer it. He did remix it a little bit, but he definitely remastered it. So it sounds way huger than the original Spotify version. So it's kind of like a happy mistake, if you will, or that they pulled it off. And they haven't pulled it off since. I hope it's still on there. I haven't checked in a while, but I think someone referenced to me that they've re-listened to it recently, so I assume it's still up there. But yeah, they'll pull off shit. Spotify's kind of ruthless where they'll take all the money from something and then get pissed at you about not following the rules. And it's just like, well, you're just ripping off bands left and right, you know?
Yeah, they send me a free trial email every other week, and I just never use it because I have no interest in it.
Listen, man, what's going to have to happen is, and it's going to happen, about I would say 5 years from now, bands are going to start getting together and saying, we're not buying into the Spotify thing, and we're going totally straight up. You either buy our music or you're not going to hear it, because bands are losing so much money, and the labels that are the big labels are whoring out their bands purposely because they get money from it, but the bands don't. So I talk to Mastodon, talk to Lamb of God. I guarantee those bands who get 1 million plays a year, or no, more than that probably on certain songs. I mean, maybe 1 million plays a month. I don't fucking know. People listen to them all the time. They're not getting any checks from it, as opposed to when they play a show, they're selling an LP to someone, you know? And there's a validity in, if I think of a record rules, I'm going to buy it when I see the band live, even though I've tested it out on Spotify before this. There's validity to that. That does exist, but for every person that does it, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 that don't. So the numbers are not in your favor. People are gonna be like, if I get it for free, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much have to have a solid following for the ticket sales and pretty solid merch game to even be successful on the level that some of those bands are.
Without question. The only good thing is this, which is the more successful you are, those bands we just mentioned, you don't have to deal with all these tentacles that are working for you in order to facilitate you being successful. And then money doesn't fly out the window as much. I've seen it work so well, man, where you are a banging underground band that just has it down, that does everything independently, and you will clean up, you will make money, and you will do it on your own terms. So it's, meaning if you feel like taking 6 months off and just not doing anything, you're not going to have a label on your ass saying you've got to do something, or else we're essentially going to be pissed at you, or we're going to drop you, or we're going to start looking other ways to make money other than you. And that's awesome. It's a great thing to have. A lot of bands this is the one thing I respect about that, the culture that would be Maryland Death Fest culture. If you look at those lineups, a lot of those bands do it the underground way, and they do everything on their own terms. Sometimes to their detriment, because there will be bands on those schedules. I think MDF just announced what would be their lineup essentially for 2022, because they're not doing it this year. But they have bands on it that literally have taken multiple, sometimes 15-year hiatuses, 20-year hiatuses, multiple times. They just don't fucking do it. And that, to me, as a fan of a band, sucks, because I'm like, you can only take really one full break and then come back, you know, before I'm starting to get annoyed with it. But they do it all the time in that world. But they've all been masters of their crafts, you know. First demo in 1981, didn't come out with anything again until 1999. 15-year break, now back at it. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's almost like their band is part of their life, like a kid, as opposed to something that they're jumping around to and just looking to do. Kind of like every other dude that's, you know, I'm in this band 1 minute, then I joined another band, then that band broke up. Now I'm in this band solely, but I got a side project, and it goes from there. You know, come to Chicago, that's everyone. Everyone's in multiple bands. That's just it. Which kind of sucks, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, and you book shows in Chicago a lot too. What do you think the whole scene around that is going to look like up there after this is over and things start opening up again?
You know what's funny is this, which is it goes back to when you used to live here, man. That was really a golden era for Chicago local music that also facilitated rad, cool underground tours. And it's anything from, you know, I booked so many shows, man, but I used to see rad shows where I'm just like, Jesus Christ. And like, here's an example. The first show that you saw me play, which is essentially the first time we met, even though I don't think we talked that night at the show, probably about 6 months after that, I booked Death Heaven at that same club. All right. So Death Heaven came through. I obviously promoted the show, and I liked Death Heaven a lot. There was probably 30 paid, maybe less. All right. Year and a half later, I want to say Sunbather came out, and the rest is history. They became one of the biggest bands in metal, not overnight, because they hustled in the years leading up to that, but it was like a fucking light switch. The reason I booked Death Heaven on that one show was because about a year before that, I saw them come through what I believe was the first time them coming through Chicago, and they played a house. They played a basement. It was them. They were on tour with Ken Mode. And Stavros and a couple Atlas Moth dudes were there, and there was this place called Albion House. And I saw them play, and I was like, this band rocks. Obviously, when you guys want to come through again, hit me up. They did. And then before now, I was booking a show for them. But it was that second record, I think it was their second record that really blew them up, and the rest is sort of history. But you would get shows like that several times a week. It was always the it bands that were going to be the it bands coming through before they were the it bands. And it was awesome. It was so fucking cool. And then what happened was it caused all the bands in Chicago to take their game up a notch to roll with these bands that were great coming through. And then people would come over from different states, and there was a lot of transplants coming to Chicago. And they were so psyched to get out and experience live music that they didn't get in their own cities that they grew up in. There was people coming over here from, whether it be Canada, or I knew like a dude from Europe who's basically spending a whole summer here. And then he's going to shows every night. And it was just the place to be. It didn't hurt that bands like Knock Mystium were blowing up around that time. And they were what was looked at as a finger on the pulse of an American black metal band. Everyone just started ripping them off after that. It was probably the like Assassins record or whatever came out. They were just ripped off. And everyone took that blueprint around. So Chicago was the place to be. Really, really, even the bad shows were good, is what I'm driving at. When that honeymoon sort of ended, had a lot to do with the fact that it became, first of all, it became harder to live in Chicago than ever before. Rents went insane. People then said, fuck this shit, I'm going back home. And they took all these things they learned in Chicago and they brought them back to places like Detroit or Indianapolis, Cleveland. And then those scenes got better, but our scenes, because these were the tried and true people of it, got worse. And no one really filled the holes. So all this young crop you expected to come up, go to a show right now, it's people that are my age, 35, going to shows. And Nate Madden from Immortal Bird, good friend of mine, one of my best friends that's in a band in Chicago, he'll vent to me about it and be like, where's this young crop? And I go, I don't know, dude. And he goes, but do you remember when we were growing up, we were 21 years old and you couldn't keep us out of a show. We were there like every other night we were going to a show. And I go, yeah, I fucking remember it, dude. That's like part of our DNA. And he goes, and the majority of the crowd were all people in their early 20s. I go, yes. I'm like, I find it weird too. I don't know where these kids, they're hiding in their rooms playing guitar. They don't find it, the experience of going to a live show interesting. Maybe they're intimidated. But because of that, when shows come back around, you add COVID into the mix, or a post-COVID world. Rod, like, listen, man, you could probably agree that it's already daunting, the idea of going from not doing anything in a year for 1 year into going to a show with 200 people at it. Like, that's probably a little scary, right?
Yeah.
So you add that into the fact that people really don't want to go to shows to begin with. And no offense to the bands in Chicago, so many of them, I know because I'm such close friends with them, haven't jammed through like for a year. So it's going to take them 6 months minimally to get back in swing, or they're going to suck live, or just want to get out and do something. So it's probably not going to be good for the first year, man. And it is what it is. I'm not going to be mad about it because I still want to go to a show every now and then and rage. And I'm sure there's going to be some cool shows coming up. I'm sure Something Is Waiting will be playing cool shows. We were lucky enough to stay in Stroke this whole time for the most part. But it's not, again, if it wasn't like it was before COVID, it's definitely not going to be like what it was after COVID,
I mean, like, how many venues are still going to be around?
Yeah, so luckily, Chicago has been able to keep several venues at least on their last limb, which is very key because when if they're on their last legs, all right, they're still there. And right now, again, I advocate, I don't know what DC's like, the DC area is like right now, but Chicago is actually, the vaccines are kind of going around at this point. And that makes people optimistic, very optimistic actually. So that's why venues are saying, hey, I think it's now kind of the dawn of this whole thing, as opposed to like, the Batman, fucking Dark Knight Rises line. But when it comes down to it, they're thinking that this is going to end soon. And because of that, all the time that they spent selling carry-out liquor, for example, or having venue fundraisers, GoFundMes. They had some one of the best clubs in Chicago called Livewire had a couple bands. One of them was Local H, do a thing where they play the club, and there'd be no one there, and they would just have an online fundraiser. And they ended up raising, like, I think for that Local H show, like something close to $5,000 for the club, just cause. Really nice. And there's a lot of stories like that. Cobra Lounge, which you've been to with me, they have great food there, and they were able to keep their kitchen open and do the carry out shit, you know? So just the little things. Reggie's another example. Just the little things kept them afloat. And now with the summer coming, they're going to be able to do shows, and then people are going to, I would think, are going to come out and want to spend money, you know, or at least be cool with spending money, over tipping a little bit, which I recommend to anyone. If you're looking to go out initially, just, you know, think about the person who hasn't had a proper shift in a year, basically, and help them out a little extra than you would, you know? So I think the complexion is there's a couple of venues that did close down. If I know that Subterranean was kind of in the middle. And then the one spot that closed down, which isn't a venue, is the Three Floyds Brew Pub out in over the border is closed. Now, I think that hopefully that could reopen, but, you know, the casualties in Chicago were minimal compared to what they could have been.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering if, you know, after all this time being stuck inside, people are going to be excited to have anything at all to go out to do, and they'll just like rush out to do pretty much anything.
It's a really good point. I mean, I know this, which was in Chicago, we were on lockdown. Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, was one of the harshest mayors during all this. Take that as you will. But as far as this is talking about major city countrywide, she was one of the harshest. We had nothing going for the city for the first, I want to say 3 months of COVID, as I guess we shouldn't have. Around the summer, around June, she started lifting like little restrictions. We were allowed to like have outdoor restaurant experiences and stuff like that. Still socially distant, but she lifted them. And then the result was pretty gangbusters. Everyone started going out, and they not only wanted to go out, but they were trying to enjoy summer in Chicago, which is the only 3 months out of the year that we get good weather, you know? So, but then what happened was we enjoyed our summer, man. And as soon as October hit, like October 1st, with Halloween looming, they cracked down again. And then everything went back down. Now we're getting to the point where it's kind of, for the most part, over as far as them putting harsher restrictions on. That's over. But, you know, there's the patios rolling, and it goes from there. Bars like Empty Bottle, for example, which is one of the best clubs in the city, and there was never a chance of that closing down because the roots of that place are way too deep, and it's such a great club. They're open right now. It's just a regular bar, no shows, and there's a capacity which I believe is 50. And for a venue that holds 300 plus, that's enough socially distanced space. Probably the majority of those kids there's a chance they might have the first vaccination already. So it kind of works out. And I'm sure they're wearing masks between drinks. So I think it's relatively safe.
Yeah. And, I know you're a big Zombie fan. You've mentioned them a few times.
Yeah.
Rob Zombie just came out with his new album. What'd you think of it?
You know what's funny is I've gotten shit for liking Rob Zombie my whole life, period. It was only cool when, up until the tour cycle of Hellbilly Deluxe ended, and then after that, it was over. People, for whatever reason, Hellbilly and everything before that is the best shit that he's done. The White Zombie stuff is my favorite stuff. It's my favorite stuff of the 90s, arguably. Pantera and White Zombie are my two favorite bands from the 90s that aren't grunge. But Hellbilly Deluxe is insane. Then when Sinister Urge came out, everyone, especially my sort of tribe of high school friends, started going the more extreme metal direction, which I also went with them. We all loved Cannibal Corpse. We all loved Napalm Death and stuff like that. I saw Napalm Death for the first time live when I was 16. But I still liked Rob Zombie a lot. And everyone's like, man, you're selling that zombie tip? I'm like, yeah, it rules. And then I distinctly remember defending Sinister Urge to a lot of people, saying, Yeah, Kerry King does a guest solo, and just little pieces of flavor that would have maybe got him into it, and everyone's like done with it. And then it went from there in an even more negative direction. And then it became a parody. I became sort of a parody because particularly my band Jarred Loose did a set of White Zombie covers. And then I became the Rob Zombie guy in Chicago. Every time Rob Zombie takes a shit, someone has to let me know about it. And then I'm just like, yeah, I know. I'm a Rob Zombie fan. What do you want from me, dude? He's kind of come back around at this point because now nostalgia is cool. But it was a bad thing to go to a zombie show in about a 12-year span where I didn't get looked down upon. But with this zombie record, I'm glad. First of all, I'm glad that you kind of like Rob Zombie just as much as me, I think, because, dude, that's one of the reasons why we've been able to find common ground in a lot of things, because some dudes we dislike, and he's one of them. You know, I fucking dig the fact that he's still doing it. And the record, here's the problem. I heard John Five for about a year, who's his guitarist and probably his lead songwriter, if you will, at this point, say that this record was so heavy. And I think my definition and John Five's definition of heavy are way different at this point, because he is maybe saying it sounds really energized and he's mistaken that for heavy. But you and I know heavy music when we hear it. It doesn't sound like the new Rob Zombie record. All that said, I'm not ripping on it at all because I love it. And I think that it's so Rob Zombie just being who he is, which is he lacks ego and he lacks shame for what he's into. And he's totally just become like this almost like pseudo 70s rocker guy. And everything about him is a 70s package now wrapped in new school hard rock, basically. You know, and he's talking about shit from the 60s and 70s in all his fucking songs. And it's almost like he's in a time warp, man. And when you have songs that are called Sleazy Rider, which is a track on the record, there's no way you could mistake that for it being him embracing new culture. It's all throwbacks, you know? So it's pretty interesting. My favorite song, and it's so, fuck. Here's the problem, another problem, which is if anyone's listened to the record, the titles are insane.
Yeah, even the title. Remember the name of the records that he's done for the last few years. I can never remember the titles of the albums.
And that's what's kind of hurt him, man, because when you heard those early Rob Zombie records and the White Zombie stuff, they all had distinct names.
Yeah.
And him writing these huge giant, some of them work.
But Hellbilly Deluxe 1 and Hellbilly Deluxe 2 both have like crazy subtitles to them too. Like I feel like that was the original titles, and then the record label was like, yeah, maybe come up with something that's a little bit easier to remember, and he did Hellbilly Deluxe.
That's a good point. And actually, it goes back to White Zombie, man. Their records were always called something like La Sexor. Everyone says La Sexorcisto, and that's true. That's the name of the record, but it was also called La Sexorcisto Devil Music Volume 1. That's the full title of it. And it goes from there. But now I think no one cares about monitoring what he does and doesn't do. And also, I think this is his first record maybe on Nuclear Blast, if I'm not mistaken. It's a new record label. So they're not going to fuck with him at all. They're going to say whatever even the title of this record, I forget what it's called because it's so long. And I remember saying if you just cut the title in half, it'd work better, you know? But he's just overly verbose for whatever reason. And that is one of the reasons why I think my favorite song on the record is probably Shake Your Ass, Smoke Your Grass. Because that's the title as it should be, you know? But also it just is a total Rob Zombie stripper anthem, which is ultimately what he's best at, you know, where it's like you could see a girl rocking out to it and doing like kind of that shticky fun thing that he's always embraced, you know, which is super fucking cool. That's his aesthetic, you know, it's that, again, that 70s Easy Rider aesthetic where it's girls on the back of motorcycles being cute and, you know, rocking out, and they all have a distinct look to them. But that's my favorite song on the record. And also, there's actually quite a few bangers. Sleazy Rider is great.
Boom 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 a lot.
That's a good one. There's one, and I forget the title but it's something related to witches. And I'm just like, all right, this is cool.
That's the instrumental one, right?
What's up?
Is that one instrumental?
Fuck.
He's got a lot of instrumental interludes on this one too.
With so many interludes, yeah. The record's probably a little too long, but that's kind of a lot of Rob Zombie records. I think, well,
it's long, but every song is like 3 minutes or less.
Yeah.
It's like there's just a lot of tracks, and some of the interludes probably should have just been part of the track that they're either preceding or like coming after.
The Internal Damnation of the Hollow Man or whatever, or Howling Man. It's not that. That's not the title, but it's something Howling Man, which is a great track. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that there's a sound clip in it where it is like, this is the best machine in the world, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it stops. It's right in the middle of the song. I'm fairly certain that's from the Howard Stern show. There was Zombies, who's a huge Howard Stern fan and a huge friend of his. There was everyone knows this because it went viral. There was before Howard really cleaned up his act on Sirius, there was a machine called the Sybian where they had women ride it. It was an orgasm machine. And they had the inventor of the Sybian on one day. He's a total creep, as you could imagine. And he said that line, and they used it. Rob Zombie used it. I'm fairly certain, and they slowed it down, but he sounds just like that. So I'm going to do some research on it, but I'm pretty sure that's where it came from.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned the whole thing about John 5 saying that it was like the heaviest Rob Zombie album that they've done. With that, like I kind of agree with that. Like his context for heavy is probably different than what ours is. Because like in retrospect, he also used to play guitar for Rob Halford, but it was the Rob Halford Techno Project.
Yep.
And then I think it was called 2. And then before that, he played with like Salt and Peppa. So he's like been all over the musical spectrum. So he's got like probably a different definition of heavy.
David Lee Roth as well.
Yeah.
And you're right. And John 5 at the end of the day is him and Rob Zombie work. Oh, well, we're forgetting he was in Marilyn Manson as well.
Yeah. Well, he was the most talented person that was ever in that band, arguably.
Pretty much. I'm trying to think if there's anyone there. No, he was the most talented.
Yeah, that's why Fish is talented in the sense that he's pretty much a human drum machine, but he's also in Rob Zombie now.
Yes, and fuck, man, that's so incestuous. The thing is this, which is John 5. Twiggy Ramirez is the member of Manson who's always got the most accolades, and he's probably a pseudo genius. But John 5 is definitely more talented. Like Twiggy was a very primitive bassist, but he probably had a great songwriting ability or able to do, just be him, and he was cool as shit. He was a character. But John 5 is a virtuoso at guitar. He's so good. He's like a top 10. He's certainly a top 10 guitar player in heavy metal. Like right now, he's probably a top 3 dude. He's amazing. So for them to find each other, it's great. And then him and Rob Zombie grew up and never got away from worshiping Kiss or Alice Cooper. All the 70s stuff that them as kids in their bedroom worship, that's their bread and butter. So they're 2 peas in a pod, because when a guy like Manson becomes a famous rock star, he could be like, yeah, fuck Kiss, they suck. I know I recently rethought about when I read Slash's autobiography, and they were the same way with Kiss. As soon as they got cool enough to be in Guns N' Roses, they're like, fuck Kiss. They're lame. They're not real. And there's some validity in that, but at the same time, it's being pissed at Christmas because you found out Santa Claus isn't real. Like you don't need to be that way. You could say, yeah, I know Santa Claus isn't real, but I still could like Christmas as an adult, So that's how I kind of see it. But Robin and John 5 never lost that. That's why those riffs are the way they are in this record and such.
I mean, the one thing that does suck, I think, about being in a band like that for these dudes who are like virtuosos, though, like John 5, is that you can't ever outshine the main guy. So you have to like pull all of your punches musically.
Definitely true. And then here's the only other thing, which is when you're in a band that the the singer is the focal point. The singer is, first of all, when you're the singer is the focal point, the band is usually called that person's name. Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie, David Lee Roth, so on and so forth. But what happens is eventually those dudes, either in the eyes of the public, lose it. Some of them die. Some of them take long breaks. Some of them go back to their original bands. And then these dudes that were in their bands that wailed for all those years and that had a cult following are now able to go do their own thing. And that's how John 5 is like just basically a pseudo celebrity at this point. As far as like, he's got his own thing going on. When he's not touring with Rob Zombie, he could do guitar clinics, which I'm sure sell out super far in advance. He could tour and play small clubs. He does solo records. He does guest spots. And he's able to do that because Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson put him on the spotlight. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, Zakk Wylde had the same thing in Ozzy.
Yeah. So Zakk's an example. Also that dude from, what the fuck? All right, so Slash did a record that was a solo record. Slash doesn't sing. And then the vocalist of that band was this guy Miles Kennedy.
Oh yeah, he was in the band that did Edge's theme song.
Yes, like so after he was the focal point, he's the singer, but not the focal point of Slash's band. They're like, that dude whoops ass. And then Creed broke up simultaneously. And like, hey, dude, let's take your you could be in our band and you write these songs and be your own kind of thing. And then Alter Bridge was their band, and that band became huge. And now that guy's a household name. He's a great vocalist, you know. And Slash's solo band will never get back together again because he's going to be doing Guns N' Roses for the rest of his life, so it doesn't even matter. But he's still a household name now, which is cool.
Yeah, I never could get into Alter Bridge though.
Oh yeah, it's bad. I mean, I'll re-listen to Creed's first two records every now and again just to see. I don't know why, just to like put me back in that place in time. But it's
I never was in that place in time. I couldn't get around Scott Stapp's vocals.
They are so. I mean, it's like everyone. Let me put it this way, man. I know people who ripped on Eddie Vedder for being too over the top with his Yarler vocals when Pearl Jam was coming out in 1992 or whatever, or 1991 or whatever, and then many years later, it's Eddie Vedder on steroids. They're not even close. This guy's insane with his yarling, and his lyrics were so epic, but in like kind of like a bad way where it was.
They were super self-righteous.
Self-righteous. Yeah, that's it. Yes, very self-righteous. Totally agree. So, but yeah, you should revisit those Creed records because you just should. Everyone should delve into the late 90s. Oh, I re-listened to Saliva recently. And I was just like, dude, that's another one. That band isn't self-righteous at all, but they're just like dudes that partied in a garage in the fucking boondocks and drove around their trucks and shit, and they started a band, and it just like worked. Like it's just fucking crazy shit, you know? But it's fun to go down memory lane sometimes with that shit, but it hurts. You know,
didn't Nikki Sixx like co-write some stuff on one of their albums?
You know what's funny is this, which is right around that time when nu metal was huge. Everyone from that 80s era, excluding the big bands like Metallica didn't have to do anything with anyone if they didn't want to. Look at the Motley Crue guys. They all jumped on the nu metal wagon and just said, let us hang out with you. So
Metallica toured with all those bands. Summer Sanitarium.
That's a really good point. And they didn't have to. They could have been taking Anthrax on the road or whatever, but they're like, no, we're going to go with Limp Bizkit and Korn and Linkin Park.
Yeah, St. Anger is pretty much a nu metal album.
All right. Yeah, so I guess they did, yeah. But you see Tommy Lee, who's the drummer in Motley Crue, hanging out with Fred Durst in clubs, and then he's starting Methods of Mayhem for no reason except to be part of that nu metal clique. And they toured, and it went over horribly, and it goes from there. But Nikki Sixx, you know, all those guys who kind of had the old man complex where it was like, we don't want to not be cool. We have to jump on this. That's why I always love Vince Neil and Mick Mars above any of those Motley Crue dudes, because they just said, no, we're going to take a break. Like, we'll see when this is time to it's time to do the Motley Crue thing again. They didn't want to be like new metal 2.0 guys or tag-alongs, you know?
I mean, Mick was already an old guy in the 80s too, though. He was like Motley Crue was basically his last legs before he was just going to be like, out to pasture, both because of his bone thing and because he was quickly approaching his 40s.
He's still alive too, which is just insane. I love it. That's one tour. COVID canceled their tour this summer with Def Leppard and Poison, and they rescheduled it. So now it's coming around this summer, and they're playing Wrigley Field. For those of you who don't know, that's where the Cubs play. But it's going to be great for me to see Mick Mars one more time. I'm not saying he's going to die. He could live to be 100 and whatever, but it just looked bleak 20 years ago. So it might be borrowed time at this point, So I'm just stoked to see him one more time.
I've seen them twice since the mid 2000s, and he's got kind of like this gangly, like Jack Skellington bred with a spider kind of vibe now.
He doesn't move around a lot. I totally get what you're saying. He's super frail.
Yeah.
And it's pretty rad that the dudes in Motley Crue, even Tommy Lee, he's always spinning those sticks, and he's got the flippy drum kit. And Mick Mars is stoic, just ripping it up. And he's the most consistent member of the band because he's so focused. And he's not trying to entertain the crowd in that traditional, like rile up, get in your face, spit on you shit. But I'm just stoked he's doing it. And I really hope that band could do a couple more tours with him. And then I really just hope that once someone dies, unfortunately, they don't try to piece it together with another guitarist or whatever bullshit, which would suck.
All right, that was the first episode of the Cult House Podcast. If you dug what you saw, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you back in a couple of weeks with episode 2.